No, we're live.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'm just waiting for that.
Right.
All right, good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at about 6:32. It's the regular council meeting for Monday, May the 29th. We'll start, as we always do, with the playing of the national anthem. So if you are able, I ask that you please stand up.
Oh, Jesus. You bring them. I should be.
All right, we'd like to begin this evening by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Shelburne resides in the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. These traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions. It is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. And we encourage residents to review the call to action information, which can be accessed by visiting one of the links on our website. With that, just a standard reminder to members to declare any pecuniary interest they may have with respect to any agenda item tonight. I don't see any now, but if it arises throughout the meeting, you can declare at that time. On to minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented for our May 8th council meeting? By Councillor Gashardi, seconded by Councillor Wagner. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Public question period. I don't see anybody in the gallery. Were there any questions submitted beforehand? Okay. On to proclamations. We have a number this evening. The first is for ALS Awareness Month. Whereas ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, is a rapidly fatal motor neuron disease for which there is no known cause or cure, whereas over 2,500 Canadians at any given time are living with ALS. And whereas ALS is known as Lou Gehrig's disease, it can strike anyone regardless of age, gender, or circumstance. And whereas recent advances in ALS research have produced promising leads, and we must continue this crucial work. And whereas the ALS Society of Canada is dedicated to providing direct support to ALS patients, along with their families and caregivers, to ensure the best quality of life possible while living with ALS. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of Council, do hereby proclaim June 2023 as ALS Awareness Month in the town of Shelburne. Second one is for Pride Month. Whereas every year cities around the world celebrate the diversity that strengthens our town to commemorate and support sexual and gender minorities liberation. And whereas Pride Month is a positive stance against discrimination and violence towards lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people to promote their self-affirmation, dignity, equality rights, increase their visibility as a social group, build community, and celebrate sexual diversity and gender variance. And whereas the rainbow flag is the most recognized LGBTQ symbol designed in 1978, and whereas Pride Month in Shelburne is an opportunity to prevent discrimination and promote awareness and acceptance of every human person and to promote the development and harmonious relationships amongst all members of the community. And whereas we support an inclusive and respectful community where all citizens can live, work, and play in a safe and secure environment. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of council, do hereby proclaim June 2023 as Pride Month in the town of Shelburne. And we do have an agenda item a little later on, which further speaks to our commitment in this regard. Next one is for Crossing Guard Appreciation Week. Whereas the Ontario Traffic Council School Crossing Guard Program Committee, of which the town of Shelburne is a member, has promoted the Crossing Guard Appreciation Week in all participating municipalities across the province be declared for the week of June 5th to 9th, 2023. Whereas each and every school day, dedicated individuals, whom we call crossing guards, commit their attention and energy to assisting pedestrians across busy streets as they arrive and depart from school and work. And whereas the town of Shelburne and the Shelburne Police Services Board places a top priority on pedestrian safety and commends our crossing guards for their continued commitment to the safety and well-being of pedestrians. And whereas crossing guards play a critical role in ensuring the safety for pedestrians and have a deep sense of responsibility, a great deal of character, an excellent relationship with children, and the dedication necessary to brave inclement weather. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of council, hereby proclaim the week of June 5th, June 9th, 2023 as School Crossing Guard Appreciation Week in the town of Shelburne. And the final proclamation is for Brain Injury Awareness Month. Whereas brain injury happens in an instant, it does not discriminate, nor does it impact one person. Brain injury changes the lives of people of all ages, genders, and ethnicities, leaving little time to adapt. This debility lasts a lifetime and often leaves many with feelings of grief, loneliness, anxiety, depression, and inability to cope. And whereas acquired brain injury is the leading cause of death and disability for those under the age of 45, and acquired brain injury is 15 times more common than spinal cord injury, 30 times more common than breast cancer, and 400 times more common than HIV/AIDS. And whereas as we begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel with the pandemic, we're hopeful that many people will, in time, be able to once again venture out and regain their social networks and supports, reminded of the many people with brain injuries who will remain isolated and afraid. The understanding we have gained from our own experiences with isolation this past few years has reminded us to shine a light on brain injury and support those impacted by brain injury in Ontario. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of council, do hereby proclaim June 2023 as Brain Injury Awareness Month in the town of Shelburne. Council inquiries. Councillor Renato.
Thank you. First one I want to bring up is about the issue of making sure that smoking and picking in the park takes place in designated areas. I've had a complaint from a few citizens that had a meeting where they were trying to organize. There was someone smoking within the meeting area and not something that the persons that were complaining were happy about. So can we make sure that the organizers do make sure that the smoking is done within their campsites, within the designated areas, and maybe have our bylaw officers go through as well? Make sure that that is the case and not smoking outside of those areas. Okay, that's one. The other question, I guess, is more for Dick. Splash pad has a lot of inquiries. Are we getting near completion? And maybe give us a bit of an update as to where we're at with it, because the public has looked at it. They see the beautiful buckets and whatever else is there and the pad, and they're concerned, one, cement isn't the finished product, that there's something else going on top of that, which I'm thinking that there probably is, but to just letting them know where we're at with the splash pad.
Sure, for your worship. The group has been working way over there. They've had a couple of setbacks, one being groundwater table. This year was 2 feet higher than last year, so they had water at about 7 feet instead of 9, so that took a little extra time to do. They do have all their plumbing in place, the concrete's been poured, the structures are up. For the most part, their work is starting down on the electrical room for the pumps, all that sort of stuff. Then there'll be the final connection for water and storm, still hasn't come yet. And then final grading around the outside and keep groundwater, rainwater running away. And then the pad itself is going to slowly keep the pad water within itself so it can recirculate.
Is there something else going on about the cement?
I'd have to double check on that, whether there's the rubberized stuff that goes in there yet. I believe there was some of that, but I'd have to double check on that.
There's been a bit of concern by some of the people I've spoken to in the public that if it's not something else, that if we become slippery with the water and young children might get hurt or fall or.
I speak to this.
They do still have some features to put in that concrete yet. There's actually spray nozzles that go right in the concrete that spray out. So they're not quite done there yet either. So.
Denise may have some insights as well.
Sorry, I did send an information email to council this afternoon with photos of the project. I did indicate that our intent is to provide an update on the town page by the end of this week, and that's where we would have the public get the information. We certainly always know when a project is under construction that people like to provide some input, but certainly, this is going to be a very well-structured playground. It's a $700,000 project. $400,000 of which is coming from the town. And certainly I think when it's completed, people will be happy, but it will not be done probably until the end of this month of the earliest.
It's just, the questions are coming, so the more we can inform the public, the better, I think that.
The town page will be where we ask you to direct people to on a project update, because I said, with the SBA information today, we need to gather that and provide some timelines and what it will look like. But I can be fair. We had people thinking that, basically we come in and we plop the equipment on a piece of turf. There's probably now hopefully a recognition of the significant site prep, the electrical, the underground work, the excavation, everything that had to go into, and I mean, for me, it's like you just don't move into your house without the electrical and all the underpinnings of making it stand up. That's sort of what we're dealing with right now.
Fortunately, a lot of public will seem to understand that.
We know that's okay, but it's going to take a bit more.
Yeah.
And just to note as well, if we don't have any of the rubberized surface on it, there are different techniques that cement finishers can do, which they may or may not have already done, which will texturize the surface so that it's not so slippery. I believe Alliston's splash pad does not have any rubberized membrane. It's all cement.
Yeah.
And they've just used different techniques to texturize the surface so it's not slippery.
I know when I was questioned on, I was trying to think of what Orangeville did.
Yeah.
So
I-
through Jim, we'll confirm what the surfacing is that was purchased as the
Yeah.
project was, that component of the project was the responsibility of the Rotary. But we know that when we buy anything from these accredited companies, they are not going to provide us with a product that would create any safety issues for children.
I think that's an important point. I mean, anybody concerned, assure them that we're not winging this. We're not just putting a splash pad up in the way that we think is best. I mean, we're using companies that specialize in this kind of work, so that they can be assured that it'll be done properly.
The other question for Jim again, on trees that have been cut down on boulevard areas, there's trees not necessarily, are we replacing them as they're being cut down? Because I know on Greenwich, for example, there was a tree cut down, and there doesn't seem to be anything in that area. So I'm getting questions again about that. When we're cutting those trees down, are we replacing them?
Through your worship. Yes, as close as we can get to that spot, that's what we're doing. The tree that comes down, eventually the stump gets ground out. But underground, there's still material there, and that's, you can't put the replacement tree in exactly the same spot. We try and keep as close as we can, but yes, any of them that were removed, we're looking at putting them back in a very similar spot, unless the resident is very close to it. had a couple of heads and we just redirect those trees to a different area just to keep canopy levels at the same.
Sounds great. And my final one is, a question, I don't know who will be able to answer this. It's complaints about large trailers and work vehicles parking on the road, taking up 2 to 3 parking spots on our roads, and it's creating some places it's creating a parking issue because of the amount of space that they're taking up, where they have a truck and a trailer, large trailer parked right behind it, and they're just taking up space. Is there anything we can do about that issue when they're parked more than they?
Jennifer?
Through your worship, so, if the trailer is attached to a vehicle, it is permitted to park on the road. There is no time limit. There is no, only during winter parking hours is when they would not be permitted to park overnight. That being said, any trailers that are unhitched, that is a ticketable offense.
Okay. But not the whole thing.
So through the mayor to Councillor Bernard, it's really still important, similar to what we've expressed before, that while we appreciate that residents contact you, they need to contact the town with a complaint and file it.
Mhm.
Because then if it's an offense that actually can be activated against through a bylaw, then we will have bylaw address it. But if in the absence of that being received, there's nothing that we can follow up with.
Actually, I had a resident this morning that called me in regards to that, and I said to him to contact town and bylaw on both cases with his complaint, because he was asking me on certain bylaws, and like I said to him, he passed a lot of bylaws. I
Mhm.
can't have them all in my head.
Yeah.
And be able to repeat to you exactly what they are. So your best bet is to contact town, contact the bylaw officers, and they have more knowledge because they work in that field, rather than me trying to give you something and it's not necessarily correct.
Okay.
That's it.
All right.
I've taken up enough.
Who's next? Councillor Sample.
Weeds in our parks. So if you take a look at the soccer field now, looks like a white field instead of a green field. I know when I was on council before, we put all our public works through a fertilizing and weeds control program to allow them to be able to apply that. So if anybody's been playing on those fields and knows, once you break the stems of a dandelion, it becomes like a skating rink. So we just need to get that under control. We did a walkthrough on the soccer field with Jamie in the fall of last year. Brad was with us. There were some areas of concerns of huge divots. Those areas haven't been repaired or anything. So just want to bring it up to everybody's attention that we need to look after these fields. We paid a lot of money for them, so we just need to get them under control again. Baseball field, same condition. So
I can address dandelions
is that
and probably Jim. So thanks. We're dealing with other comments from other field users regarding dandelions. So as all municipalities in Ontario, we do not spray pesticides. There were probably field application processes in the past, and some of those fertilizers would be deemed pesticides. So we can certainly look into that, but
This is on the unfortunate new reality where with rain, with
the aggressive invasion of dandelions, that we're going to have to assess where they're prevalent in May
and potentially in early June, if clubs are calling us with their safety
issues on when permitting starts. Because we're not going to spray and we're not going to apply any fertilizer. So if we come up with a different program that is ecologically supportive, then we would just have to look at the cost of that kind of application to suppress dandelions. I mean, that's about it. That's all we're going to do, because we're just not going to spray.
right, but there are products out there that we can use that are not harmful to
Yeah, and we would have,
animals or dogs
yeah,
or
we
kids.
will have to look into that. We'd have to cost
with the application of that product is and build that into the operating budget. Right now, we've taken the approach that we live with said dandelion. Just like our homes do, knowing that there's a lot of, so you're right, sea of yellow right now, you turn into a sea of. And those little guys, if you mow them, they seem to go down and then pop back up.
Yeah, they do. They have strong stems.
Very, very innovative.
I'm just curious what other towns do, because when you go to their fields are green. They're not like ours. So we spent a lot of money on greenwood. I would expect that we
You-
should take some care in.
When you cut them originally, the first cut, they're green. And then later they pop back up.
Oh, I know how it works. I
Yeah.
There are too, so. So, yeah, so I just that. Since I've been out and around town. What are we, do we have the street sweepers coming in again, or what's happening there?
That's a Jim question.
It was one of probably the worst year that I've seen for a street sweeper in this town.
We did RFP it this year. It's the new group that came in and did it. They did move through town a lot quicker than the previous group. So there was some areas where parked cars were, some of the heavier areas that were silted in pretty good that we've noticed that. And so we do have the contractor available to come back to that next week or so too as well.
And one more. At the back alley, just outside our front door here. The one that goes in behind all the Johnny.
The laneway?
The laneway. Red storefront. The two parking spots that are there, they seem to, it looks like they impede vision of oncoming traffic. I've had a few people ask me about it. I don't know if it's us or if it's BIA or we're putting it or if we're relooking at parking spots. I don't know, but if we are, I'd just like to put that on it's one of the spots we need to check onto.
So the parking is on the laneway or the parking
It's
is on
right, it's
Victoria?
right. Parking is on Victoria.
So where they're adjacent to one another.
Yeah, so when they exit and enter
At Victoria.
at Victoria, yes. It's pretty tight there and that parking spot is like right on the corner, so
Yeah, to creep out to see around.
Okay, so it's a town.
It's town.
It's on Victoria.
it's on Victoria, yes.
Next.
I don't know what we're doing about the mosquitoes. That- They're driving me crazy.
I know a guy.
Oh, man, I can't even sit outside. I'm like getting eaten alive.
Black flies right into mosquitoes.
I
Right?
know a guy.
I need something at my place, but I know I've had a couple of community members reach out and I guess there's a few areas of concern. I can't remember exactly where she said right now, unfortunately, but I guess there's a little bit of a stagnant pond. And it's over in the new section and they're a little concerned that it could be a very large breeding ground over there. So I don't know if there's a treatment that we can put in the water or if we can just get it circulated with something.
So, sorry, is that the stormwater pond?
It might be, yeah.
Can you give us a little bit more? Is it Highlands? You're talking about like the new?
Yeah.
Jim
Jim?
knows, okay,
Let me double check.
Hey,
here.
Jim
Well,
knows.
He speaks, I'll find it.
okay.
For your worship, we did have complaint come in today on O'Reilly, so it's in the Greenwood subdivision. Stormwater pond out there, it's very large pond. It isn't actually stagnant. I did go look at it this afternoon. It does turn over quite quickly in there, because it does take 2/3 of the subdivision up there and through that pond, so it does blow it out pretty good. We couldn't, similar to last year, we had a request to spray for frogs in that area. And frogs, eating mosquitoes, that sort of thing. We couldn't do that last year for that. We can't spray for mosquitoes either. It dumps directly into Walter Creek, which is a cool water stream.
Yep.
Has fish in it and they go right up to where Walter Creek is. So it's just one of those things. It does seem like a bad year for myself and Alice and I, eating alive on the weekend, middle of the afternoon. So this seems like a bad year for him, but he should knock it down the next week, I would think. So.
Yeah.
And they're big too, right?
It's been a particularly bad year, like everywhere, so.
And that's what I think as well. Like I mentioned that, you always have a year of the something.
Yeah.
And I kind of think it's the mosquitoes this year. So I did mention that to this community member. Plus I asked her to file a formal complaint. So I'm glad that one has come through and it was O'Reilly. So, yeah, they are big suckers this year too. So I'm looking forward to them dying off soon. Oh, God.
So you need a citronella candle.
Oh, man. You know what? I've even collected toads and brought them back to my garden. I gave them a toad house and they left. And I'm like, come on, man, just stay here so you can eat some of these mosquitoes.
You got the wrong thing. Get back.
Bats are good.
Yeah, I had a bat house. I did. I had a bat house as well. So, and we had a couple and I don't know, my neighbor said something and I was worried that I
Purple heart, they eat tons of
Then you'll get
mosquitoes.
complaints about bats.
exactly, right? So I took the bat.
All right, any other inquiries before we jump in with the rest? No? Okay. All right, so the first report is from our planner regarding a revised rezoning application for the Stone Ridge Scone development. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you and I see we've got the report on our desk here.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, my presentation has been circulated and the intent of that is simply to summarize the more detailed report that's in your agenda package. And the applicant is, I think, online as well, Kimberly Harrison McMillan. So if there are any questions between the two of us, we'll try our best to answer them for you. And the presentation being shared online as well. Great. So this is to deal with 3 related applications. The first one is Z22 the rezoning application that you heard at a public meeting on April 3rd. The next is a new application for part lot control exemption number 2301. And then the third is the overall draft plan condominium application for this development, which is the development located at Main Street West and Orange Street. Referred to as Shelburne Towns, also Stone Ridge, and the developer is Stone Development. So you're familiar with the location of the development at the west end, first and second Ave, and again on the main Gordon. There are 2 phases for the development. So 1A is the area outlined in green, and that's 33 townhouse units that are nearing the end of construction. And one of the reasons for this report is that this will facilitate the registration of condominiums, so that those units can be occupied and the condominium corporation can be created for those 33 units. At the south end of the development, former main Gordon is phase 1B, where block 7 of the development was before you for a rezoning and site plan application on April 3rd. Previously, it was proposed for 9 triplex units in 3 buildings and 2 semi-detached units for a total of 11. So tonight I'm here to present you a revised plan for phase 1B for a total of 7. I'll get into the details of that shortly. And then the yellow shading didn't really show up in the hard copy, but the entire development, including 1A and 1B, is pretty much subject to a request for part lot control exemption, even except for the small one block in the middle of the development block. And next slide. So this slide shows the site plan that was submitted originally for block 7 at the south end of the development. You can see the buildings labeled as 1, 2, and 3. Those are each proposed as triplex buildings with 3 units, 1 on each level. Zoning amendments associated with those proposed triplex units that are summarized at the bottom of the slide there, and that were presented at the public meeting. And then at the most southerly end of the site in block 2, 2 semi-detached units in 1 building were proposed. And again, the details with respect to the zoning amendment that was proposed originally are summarized there. Won't go through those details because we just on the next slide. There is a revised proposal now with some adjusted. So working with the applicant, and in light of some of the concerns that were raised with respect to the triplex duplex units and parking and overlook the neighboring dwelling. The applicant proposed to continue phase 1A development into phase 1B. These are going to be essentially the same size, same style as in the first phase, located south of the storm pond and oriented towards Gordon Street. I think this is a better layout for a number of reasons. Each unit would have compartment spaces dedicated to the unit. It would look very similar and integrate well with the first phase. It would reduce the potential for traffic and parking issues. And it still works with the shared driveway and stormwater access to provide some additional overflow parking if there is visitor parking needs for the units. This also works well in terms of incorporating these units within the condominium plan. So these would be additional parcels of private land that will contribute to the condominium common elements. So it's very much a natural extension of the phase 1A development. The south end of the site is, however, still zoned R3, which only permits single and semi-detached dwellings. And it is a bit too small to fit townhomes in that lot. So the applicant is continuing to propose some semis with some refinement of the zoning. I think at the public meeting, one of the main concerns with the semi-detached units was the proposed access from Main Street. And we continue to work with the applicant to look at different options for that. And so you'll see on the next slide over, we created a zoning bylaw amendment that could accommodate either layer. So the reason why it wasn't initially presented this way with access off of Green Street is because it does really narrow the rear yard for the southerly unit. It gets fairly small and close to the westerly property line. But you can see that lot would overall be fairly large with a large yard. So the amount of amenity space is still acceptable in my view. And the details of how that's going to be laid out would be subject to the overall subdivision. So obviously with the design of that southerly unit, we would take into consideration the heritage comments to make sure that it addresses both Main Street and Gordon Street. And on the concept here, a wraparound porch has been shown as an example of one type of feature that could help to address the corner. Overall, we just think that that is a better option. If this is approved tonight, basically what the next step would be is for all of these units, the owner would have to submit detailed operating and service plans as well as detailed building plans, including elevations and everything else. And all of the units would be subject to the design guidelines in the master subdivision agreement. Site plan approval under section 41 of the Planning Act, however, would no longer apply because it only applies to development of more than 10 the Planning Act as amended. So, although we don't require a site plan anymore for the overlooks, there would still be details provided in the subdivision agreement. Summarize the zoning on the next slide. And highlighted in gray and red the provisions that we need some relief from the parent zoning, R3 zoning. So if the units were configured with access to Main Street, which would require engineering and public works approval over that entrance, so that the frontage of those units would be slightly less than what's required by the bylaw. So the proposed frontages are identified there, 8.2 meters for the interior lot and 9.8 for the corner lot. And really that frontage just is less than required because the lot narrows as you get down to Main Street. The front yard we're proposing, similar to what we've done in other subdivisions and recent developments, that it would allow the dwelling itself to be closer than 6 meters to the front lot line, but the garage still has to be 6 meters back to preserve the parking. That just gives more flexibility to achieve the target building size without pushing it back into the rear yard too much. The exterior side yard for the corner unit in the second scenario with the access from Main Street would require reduced exterior side yard of 0.2 meters. Whereas if access is from Gordon Street, that's fairly easy to meet the 4.5 meter exterior side yard requirement. And then in all scenarios, a bit of a reduction in the rear yard would be required. I've just put a couple of asterisks beside those numbers because as you see in the footnote, one of the downsides of the access from Main Street in that configuration is both rear yards of both units would be impacted by a 3 meter sanitary sewer easement. So they wouldn't have that much of a functional area that they could use for sheds and decks and those kinds of things. With the other plan, with the indication for Gordon Street, they would have a larger rear yard for one of the lots, smaller rear yard for the other lot, but no easements in the rear yard. Saving except for I put an asterisk beside the 1.8 meter rear yard, so it really would only be 1.8 meters at the narrowest point, and then it gets wider from there up to 6 meters. So that's an overview of the zoning application. On the next slide, you'll see there is one other component to it, which relates to removing the holding zone. All of these conditions listed here have now been addressed. And then I'll just jump to the next application. So I provided, because it's such a long development, I couldn't fit it all on one slide. And I just wouldn't be able to see very much. So for the Carlisle application, I just wanted to explain a little bit about what this is for. So when things like townhomes and semis are built, often the lot line in between the units is not created at the same time as the whole plan is designed, because you need to vary that a little bit once the foundations are poured into the ground. So the part lot control exemption process puts a temporary bylaw over the whole development and allows the owner of the development to sell parts of the lots corresponding to each unit. So the surveyed lot lines then fall within the center of the walls, and everything is done precisely. The other function of that part lot control process is to ensure that all the easements that are required for access by the condominium corporation, for things like regular drainage, for retaining walls that are shared by the entire development. And you'll see in the front yards of the units, there's also utility easements for Bell and Bridge Hydro. That's because this is a condominium roadway, it's not as wide as a municipal roadway. So that means that some of the underground utilities are easements within the front yard. So this first plan is just showing the proposed lots, as well as the drainage easements, the utility easements, and the retaining wall easement at the very northerly end as well. And then subsequent to that, there's a number of slides that show the other blocks involved in part lot control application. So blocks 2 and 3, those are pretty straightforward. They have the rear yard drainage easements, and then the front yard utility corridors. And then the next slide, same idea with block 4 and 5. The one thing I wanted to highlight on this block is as the development was being constructed, a sanitary sewer lateral servicing the property at 235 Second Ave was discovered, and it does encroach on this property. So to maintain that sanitary sewer lateral has been replaced as part of the development. This would give access by that owner if they have a contractor to come in and replace that lateral in the future. Hopefully it wouldn't be that for a very long time. And then over to the next slide, there's a separate M plan 781 for these 4 units. They have the rear yard drainage access easement, they have the front yard utility easement shown in gray. And then there's 2 parts, which is a blow up from the left, this plan on the left hand side shown in orange there. One of the other encroachments on this development site that was identified early on is the driveway for 226 First Avenue. It actually comes into the condominium. So this easement over those orange parts gives that owner of 226 First Avenue the right to use that condominium road to get to the driveway from First Avenue and back without having to pay for the condominium. And then one more slide on the part lot control application. So a number of easements and parks are required for the development of block 7. The area shown in purple would be the shared driveway, which would also serve as a stormwater management access road for periodic maintenance of the stormwater pond by the condominium corporation. In yellow, there's a few lots that would be connected to a sanitary sewer that's already in the ground there, that then connects to this municipal sanitary sewer at Gordon Street. The townhouse lots are shown. The proposed semi-detached block is shown. And across that block at the back would be a 3-meter easement for an existing private sanitary force main. And that force main serves property to the west of the rail corridor, which is on John Street. There's an existing 6+ there. That is a private force main, so what that would mean is that owner of that force main will finally have legal access to that force main to repair and replace that in the future. The semi-detached block, there will be one more lot line down the middle of that, and that will ultimately depend on how the lots are oriented, either towards Gordon Street or Main Street, hopefully towards Gordon Street. And there would be a separate reference plan that would define that line once those units are further along. There is a site triangle also in the plan to be dedicated to the town to ensure that visibility is preserved at the corner of Main and Gordon. And then the last application relates to the overall draft plan condominium. So in order to give effect to those townhouse units having common elements shared within the condominium plan, the shared driveway for the stormwater management pond into the block 7 have to be added into the condominium. And so this is simply a revision of the already approved draft plan of condominium to add that area labeled as common element as a shared right of way amongst the entire. It only provides access to the second development, but would be part of the works that the condominium corporation is responsible to own and maintain. And then the owner is also ready to move forward with final approval of the overall condominium plan. So that revision, if approved by council tonight, is already put into the final condominium plan that would be deposited with the land registry office. Again, this part of it is fairly time sensitive because there's occupancy coming in the next month or so for the townhouse units in the north part of the development. And once occupancy occurs, there needs to obviously be the condominium corporation to look after the needs of the residents. The developer is still obligated to take care of the works and so forth in the subdivision agreement. But as soon as we can make that transition to the registered plan of condominium. So we reviewed the plan of condominium. There will be a bit of legal review before the final registration takes place, just to ensure all the necessary easements and transfers and everything are properly drafted. The declaration for the condominium corporation is all in order. But otherwise, in terms of the drafting side, everything is ready to go on the draft plan itself. So just to recap that, because there's quite a bit that we're looking for in terms of calculable consideration tonight. First is just to receive that report. The second is to approve that zoning application for block 7 by active bylaw 32-20. There were 3 minor changes to that bylaw since the agenda went out to there in the rear yard setbacks for semis, as well as the exterior side yard. And then the second part or third part there is approving the part lot control exemption application. Again, that allows those occupancies to take place and those reference plans to be deposited so that the individual townhouse units and easements can be created. And then the fourth and fifth part relate to each other. First, the red line revisions of the draft plan to add that common element for the stormwater management on access, as well as final approval of the plan, so that when everything is ready to go, that Jennifer can sign the plan and it can be deposited and registered. But we did circulate all those applications and we made sure those who submitted comments on the zoning application were notified that this was coming back today. We haven't heard any further comments or objections to the revised plan. Engineering and other agencies have reviewed. And of course, we'll make sure the details of the servicing, grading and everything for those block 7 units are looked after through the normal course. But other than that, that's my presentation and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Sample.
Just a question, along the rail bed, what type of fence is going up there? I mean, you know, I tried to read it's probably very small print and I can't read it.
It's definitely a fence shown. And trying to remember if it was shown as a privacy fence or a chain link. I believe it was going to be like a wood privacy fence.
I would think there should be something along that line, just because it's you got snowmobiles, you got four-wheelers, trails. Going up and down there, so. Next, you know, we're gonna have complaints coming in from the owners there that it's too noisy.
This one you can't read?
Yeah. Can you read it?
Why not? Yeah.
No.
Then this too. Yeah, I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure that it was privacy fence along that.
Steve, maybe we could get a bigger version of this.
I
So-
don't think the fencing is on that plan, that's the only thing, there's, if it were on any of these plans, it would be on these ones. Specifically for block 2. Like you can see, there's a line that should be circled in that line. That is a fence, that would be when you go in the front. The privacy fence. That's something that we can work with the applicant to require through the detailed design.
Yeah, we're gonna get it,
Yeah.
regardless. You know, when we're on baseball fields and you can hear them go by, so.
So apparently Kim has her hand up on our Zoom screen, so Kim may know. Kim, can you hear us?
Ken, good evening. Thank you, Mary Mills. So yes, we will certainly be installing a privacy fence. There would be a board privacy fence.
Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Good. Okay.
Heather, can you hear me?
Do you know how high that will be?
We would meet the fence bylaws, so I believe it would be.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
I can.
Okay. Okay.
Heather,
Okay.
can you hear me now?
All right.
Higher than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially there.
Yeah. You hear us, Kim?
I can. Yes, I can hear you.
Sound like it. Okay, well. Oh, okay,
A delay.
no, that's good. Thank you.
That's more of an acoustic fence for their industry.
Yeah.
Won't be that high.
I'm not sure if they've constructed the fence in the north part of the development yet, but whatever is there is.
For my part, Steve, I'm definitely more comfortable, I think, with this revised plan than I was their original proposal. And kudos to them. I think they addressed a lot of the concerns they heard from council and from members of the public. When it comes to the option to have access on Main versus Gordon, I think I would fall firmly in favor of the Gordon Street access for a number of reasons. So I'm not sure how everybody feels about that. I'm assuming, yeah,
I think they both have their
they do.
challenges.
They do. But it's like fewer cars coming out onto,
Yeah.
and onto Main Street, particularly because they'd likely be backing out most times.
Yes.
Well, it does.
Yeah, well, that's why I said they both have their challenges,
Yeah.
so. Regardless, especially because it narrows there.
Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts or questions for Steve while we have him? No? Okay. So it's quite a lengthy motion here. I'm not going to read through everything, but I think Steve summarized it pretty well. So the recommended motion is Steve support, approve the zoning application and enact bylaw number 42-2023, approve the part lot control exemption and enact bylaw number 33-2023, approve the red line revisions to the draft plan of condominium, and authorize final approval of the plan of condominium, or sorry, plan of common elements condominium for registration. Is there a mover and second for that? Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Gushardi. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. All right, Steve, you're up again. You're gonna fill us in on the proposed Bill 97 and changes to the provincial planning statement.
The cycle change in the planning road never seems to end, and we are trying to keep up with that, but for the purposes of this report, I've just really tried to hone in on things that would be most impactful to the town of Shelburne with respect to two items. The first is Bill 97, and actually we've already missed the comment period on that, so time to react and comment on that is kind of past us. But I would say two items where that's lesser of the two concerns. Definitely the provincial planning statement would introduce some, I would say, groundbreaking planning changes in terms of how we do things or have done things for the last 25 to 30 years. So I think it's aware of that, and I think too, what I'm recommending here is that some comments, including a copy of this report, be submitted while we can before the end of the comment period on the provincial planning statement. I did meet with the rest of the Dufferin area planners as well as the county planners, and they invited ministry staff to attend. So we had a Q&A session with them, and the answer was frequently, we'll make sure you get those comments submitted because they want to hear, especially at the ministry staff level, how municipalities react to these changes. Certainly different perspectives on this, depending on what municipality you're asking, even within the county. The rural municipalities have some things that they can gain from the new approach. For urban municipalities, I think there could be some benefits from some elements. There could be some concerning aspects as well, depending on how this plays out and how local municipalities around you adopt or adapt to the changes. So Bill 97 affects a number of different pieces of legislation. It's called the Helping Home Buyers Protecting Tenants Act. And it, I just summarized some of the key changes there, but one of the changes that I think could be a positive for the town is that it may provide some exceptions to the rule that housing developments with 10 or fewer units are not subject to site plan control. We've already had some experiences where we strongly believe that those developments should be subject to site plan control. And we've had some developments where it's not clear whether they would be subject to site plan control or not because of the way the wording the legislation is currently worded as of Bill 23. So this does leave it in the hands of the province to prescribe those areas. I'm hearing that it's likely going to relate to places like shoreline areas, so not really relevant to Shelburne in that case, but I'm hoping that they'll add, downtown or mixed use type areas, because one of the areas that's unclear right now is what happens if somebody adds, less than 10 residential units to a downtown building. Does that mean we can't apply control? In some respects, that's where we need it the most. So I'm hoping that there'll be more clarity to come on that change in the near future. The other positive from this is that the application fee refund requirements were bumped or will be bumped from January 1st to July. That requirement will only apply to applications that come in after July 1st. And what that means is that if municipalities won't process these planning applications on prescribed timelines in the Planning Act, you have to start returning some of the application fees. And they've given there's a lot to be figured out through that process, because often you'll be waiting on the applicant to respond to comments, and if the applicant's taking a long time, in my view, the municipality shouldn't be up for fees. What it does mean that in some cases, council may kind of feel about the force to refuse an application because they have to make a decision. And if you don't have the information available, you have to make an informed approval decision, then you have to refuse to avoid refunding applications. So that spirit of cooperation will still be the driving force for these application processes, but it's those ones that take extra time for whatever reason that get a little concerned with that. In terms of your industrial park, one of the changes that Bill 97 proposes is that it would not be eligible to have commercial uses, office uses, and institutional uses. So we did introduce in the official plan as of the last update permissions for office uses because that had been requested by some of the landlords. There hasn't really been much uptake on that, but this would take it back the other way. The intent being that employment areas are really manufacturing, warehousing, that kind of thing. In the Development Charges Act, they've added some exemptions for additional residential units. And this, I would say, affects the rural areas more than government, because there's already exemptions for additional residential units on urban land. This would extend those exemptions to all land, whether it's urban or not. Going through here. About the area of employment. So basically the primary impact is some of the restrictions on the uses permitted in areas of employment, the application fee refund requirements, and then this is on the positive side. There's been some concerns about with these additional residential units, how much parking is required. And this clarifies that you can in fact require more than one space per unit for the main house, but only one space per unit for each additional unit. So if you start with 2 required, and then 3 more units are added, require 5. Currently, your zoning bylaw only requires 1 space for the main unit. So that's something I think for the next zoning update, we want to look at, we require 2 for the main unit. And then that way, each additional is over and above the 2 that you started with.
Now, moving the ones in the garage that can be used.
Yes. Picking up the park car and the garage, yeah. So I think the bulk of this report was really intended to focus more on the provincial planning statement. So at the current time, this is a draft for review. There's talk from the province that the effective date could be as early as the fall of this year. I will highlight maybe some positives first. One of the things that Shelburne and other small communities have grappled with since the road plan came into effect is trying to intensify while that outward growth is happening. And you're not going to see really tall buildings, and those intensification opportunities have been mostly taken up over the last 15, 20 years. So you have less opportunity available, and yet the expectation was for more and more of that intensification. And then in your new development areas, there's also an expectation of very dense compact development. And that pendulum has been swinging back and forth for the last 20 years. Now it's swinging entirely back the other way, where basically it's up to the municipality. And so I think previous councils and probably this council as well, what we've been asking about, how much flexibility do we have? Why don't we just let the province do the work for us? If there is no flexibility, this would return that flexibility back to local municipalities. How much growth do we want to plan for? How dense is it going to be? What's the housing mix? We're back in the driver's seat if these changes go through. So that's I think the positive. The main concerning element of it is really what's proposed for the area around it. And certainly any urban municipality that experiences rural growth on its periphery, you're going to experience more pressures for your services. That could be everything from water and wastewater infrastructure, where there could be an expectation that be extended beyond your municipality to parks and recreation and more population coming into the community without getting the development charges, without getting the tax revenue So that aspect is concerning, and I think that's where there's a lack of kind of restriction in the PPS. It's almost like a blanket approach that everywhere we have that same new permission. Not only to sever existing farm parcels into as many as 3 additional residential lots, but any non-prime agricultural land could be essentially become a subdivision on private streets. You have both of those things around you, prime and non-prime land. So this could introduce quite a bit of growth in the rural part of the county, which of course will affect all the 3 urban areas in terms of service demands. So I think there is a balance there where some of that should be permitted, but I don't know if this blanket approach is the right one. It seems like it's adding too much of that all at once. And that's where, when I mentioned the groundbreaking kind of change, that has been so restricted for so long that there could be a real, pent up demand that gets released on those rural services. I think some of the other changes will need more time to figure out what they mean or what they look like. For example, the natural heritage policies, they identified they're going to completely redo that, but we don't know what that looks like yet because it hasn't been released. So we'll have more information on that, and if it seems like something that could have a big impact locally, we'll do a summary report on that. In terms of the overall financial impact, I think I've basically summarized that already, but you have some more rules in the countryside without the corresponding revenues coming to the urban areas. So that's a big consideration, but hard to quantify this. So I think that hits the high notes on what's proposed. It'll take time to actually be implemented and may change from now till then. So we don't know for sure what this will look like in the final form. If there's significant changes, we'll look back to talk about that. But for now, I wanted to give you, kind of the highlights, and then you can let me know if there's anything else you'd like captured in kind of comments. If it's okay with council to submit comments to the province on this.
Thanks, Steve. I can just sort of update council too on a couple of other initiatives. So county council at our last meeting received a similar report from county planning staff. And we're submitting a letter setting out the county's concerns, which by and large focus more on sort of the agricultural and rural aspects, obviously. And then last Thursday, I was able to jump on a Zoom meeting with the warden of Huron County and Wellington County, and we met with the Minister of Agriculture to express the Western Wardens Caucus concerns with respect to the 3 severances on prime agricultural land. And that was about an hour and a half. It was a good discussion, and in fairness to the minister, I think she definitely heard what we were saying, and I think probably shares a lot of the same concerns that we were expressing. One of the things she did say, which I found interesting, she didn't commit to it, but she at least seemed to suggest that the commenting period may well be extended based on the volume of comments they've been receiving. This hasn't been something that has gone over overly well with the agricultural community. I think there are some landowners who are probably happy at the prospects of being able to sell off several lots, but those who are actually engaged in active farming typically are not thrilled with this. So the Ontario Federation of Agriculture has come out quite forcefully against it. So I think based on some of that pushback that they're maybe looking at extending that and taking a few more comments before they put the final approval on this thing. So we'll see. But I think, from our perspective, I think those concerns you've highlighted hit the nail on the head. So I'm happy with that submission. Any other thoughts? No. Okay. So the motion is to receive Steve's report and to direct him to submit the comments highlighting the concerns that he just reviewed with us. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Sample. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Steve. I guess we'll stay tuned. All right, next report is from our CAO regarding a proposal for a Pride crosswalk at the corner of Victoria and Main Street.
Yeah, have your microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. And as you just indicated, this report is regarding the second crosswalk, which would be in the town of Shelburne if approved by council this evening and be located at the intersection here in front of Town Hall across Victoria Street at Main. So we, as a town of Shelburne, had indicated through our DEI committee that staff was going to be looking at developing a program whereby we potentially in the town of Shelburne might have up to 10 crosswalks with various themes over the next 5 to 10 years. The first one that we had last year that council approved was for Every Child Matters and also Orange Shirt Day, and that was at the William and Main Street intersection. And at the time, in fairness to council, you had expressed concerns about the longevity of the paint and our harsh winters. And to your credit, you were correct. It didn't last as staff anticipated. It didn't last at all. So we need to repaint that and acknowledge that there's not a lot of benefit to using expensive high-end paint when it's still not going to be durable. That's just to give you, I guess, comfort that what we're recommending in terms of this $1,000 endeavor will be something, unfortunately, though, that we have to do every year. But we feel that that's part and parcel of our commitment to our projects through our operating budget, and we would do it internally with our staff, not on overtime, which keeps the costs fairly low. And like any other regular maintenance requirement, it would be an embedded component of what we're committed to. So what we've recommended is that in concert with Pride Month and the declaration of council tonight, and if council approved it, we are ready to mobilize tomorrow so that this spot can be ready for the flag raising, which is currently scheduled for June the 1st at noon at Jack Downing Park. We would have a little bit of a rush to combine both, but we thought that even potentially we could have a second sort of ceremony with respect to the crosswalk. We believe that the celebration of our history, of events, causes, can significantly be enhanced with the crosswalk program. And while we have considered up to 10 locations, that is what they are at this point in consideration. Every location with the corresponding theme would be something that would be brought back to council so that you could approve that location specifically. And as I said, we would be looking at this over 5 years. It's certainly not something we would do every year. Just as a side note, even though it's not in this report, the third one that we are looking at right now is the Lest We Forget potential. It can't be poppies because poppies are an issue of respect and cannot be walked on. But we thought that that one near the post office of the Legion potentially might be the third one we do this year, and we would bring that back to you well in time. Certainly would be consultation with the Legion as part of that design to make sure that it's something that they also approve would be important. So that's just sort of a heads up on what's to come. So as I noted, we had built in the cost of the paint, which is approximately $1,000. Our staff will do it on regular time. It does obviously, like any project of this nature, would require road closures for a temporary basis. That's also why the list is not included. You might be asking major intersections, because we certainly can't close those intersections for 5-6 hours to paint. So Owen Sound at Main would not be a potential. Greenwood at Main would not really be a potential. But that aside, we think that the locations that we've provided potentially would facilitate a great walking tour, an educational component, and celebrate not only diversity, but arts and culture and heritage. So the design that we've selected is provided in Appendix 1, and this was done by reviewing the multitude of other communities that already have Pride crosswalks or whatever theme they may encompass under that provision, so that we can not to make it easy, but it is easy. It's stripes. And we've replicated that design from a number of other municipalities. So really that is the heart of the report. It's requesting council to support the location. The budget is not that it's not a non-issue, but we've covered that. We have the paint. If we didn't use this, we would use it for something else. So that concludes my hopefully quick report.
I'll ask the question publicly because I asked you last week. So one of the alternatives that I had heard about was like a vinyl application that goes on pavement. And I asked if that was a possibility.
So while we appreciate that that is a great solution in a warmer climate, and the challenge with our roads is that we put major salt and sand applications or brine. We also use plows that would scrape up the vinyl. So unfortunately, it's certainly not, it's not an opportunity for us to pursue.
Councilor Bernardo.
They use something like that at airports, my understanding, and they must put salt down on the airport runways and whatnot. So is there any possibility of investigating what they use, for example, at Pearson runways? Because they use some form of a vinyl, is my understanding.
Through the mayor, I will certainly look into it. I'm not to take away from the maintenance of an airport. I just don't know if they have the road traffic that we have. They have airplanes and they have all the vehicles, but we'll certainly look into it. We've reviewed that a vinyl application, even when we were looking at, I know a favorite topic of some, the Cheryl markings, was not the solution, that the application just didn't make sense on our roads. They could peel, but we'll take it back and we'll let you know. But for this one, we need to use paint because it's Wednesday.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions or comments? No? Okay, so the motion is to receive the report and to approve the location for the Pride Crosswalk at Victoria and Main. Third seconder by Councillor Gashardi, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. All in favor? Carried. All right. Next report is from our treasurer with our March 31st financial update. Right on cue.
And through the mayor. In a little while since you.
So this is our first quarterly report for 2023.
To audited bank. Presenting on how we stand so far for the first quarter of this year. The good news is that we did receive the Canada Day grant. $1,000 from Heritage Canada. So that will go towards the Canada Day celebration. And we were also successful this year in obtaining the Connecting Link grant for just over 1.1 million for the portion of Salmon Street, also known as Highway 10. This was the 2023 budget. And a little bit of a housekeeping matter. We did go to RFP for a new trunkless sidewalk machine, and 2 submissions were received.
The budget for this item was $183,000. These submissions were evaluated and scored.
Although not the lowest bid.
Staff are recommending the council award the RFP to work equipment in the amount of $157,804.32 net of HST. The reason that we need council's approval for that is because it is over.
Bother you with something that is already under budget. But because of that.
And Appendix 3 does show all of the other RFPs that have been awarded so far this year, which includes the street sweeping, as mentioned earlier.
The pathway at Freeman Park. That's the one that's going to go to splash pad. And
The zero turn mower for the cemetery.
those have all been approved so far this year. And then the balance of the report is the
Tables listing. And when we presented the December
quarterly report, we did not include the payables listings for October to December of 2022. So this report does include those. So it's actually 6 months worth of.
All right, Councillor Bernardo.
That track list is a replacement or an addition?
For your worship, I'm not too sure. We did have one that was up for replacement. I think we rotated that a couple of years ago, that the development charges paid for that one. So this, I believe, is a replacement this time around.
Yes, I think it is. Do you want me to, my budget book's over there, I just.
Well, I just wanted to know, just as we're growing, you seem to need more machinery to keep up with the needs in the town. That's why I was asking the question.
We do have quite a few tractors purchases in the budget. I think there's 3 consecutive years. A couple of them were new ones and I believe one was a replacement. So,
Breakdown last winter, the track was, that's why I was asking the questions.
Just to add, so we did actually recognize that in the operations review, that as the lane kilometers of sidewalks brought in from the subdivisions are assumed, we certainly will have much more care and maintenance to manage, and then therefore the equipment that goes along with that in order to meet the number of hours that we're dedicating. We'll have more staff, more tracklisses throughout our community.
So if you look in the 2023 budget, there is a whole page dedicated to equipment replacements.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few trackless machines. Yeah.
All right, anything else? Councillor Sample?
Don't know if you can answer or not. Have we used this company before? We get the tractors from? Yes.
And that is actually why it's scored higher.
That's why I'm wondering that. So
Because informed that the system is leaked. So for 800, the difference in price is
Everybody good? All right. I have a motion then to receive the March 31st financial update and to award the RFP for the trackless to work equipment in the amount of 157,804.32 net of HST. Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. All in favor? Carried. All right, carries up again for a bylaw to set the taxation rate and provide for penalties and interest for defaults. Really routine.
It is, yes, this is just the standard bylaw. We have added a couple of additional sections under the last paragraph. Right before the now therefore, where we've added in these that can be added to the tax accounts, especially now that we've got standards and different matters that. This bylaw represents the 1% increase in the tax rate as approved in the budget, which is $2.18 a month, the average.
Questions? Okay, motion then to enact bylaw number 29-2023. Moved by Bernardo, seconded by Sample. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. All right, and the last one is a bylaw to appoint our municipal bylaw enforcement officers. So Jennifer, I'll let you explain that one.
Sure. Through your worship, the bylaw before you tonight has looked at more expanded powers than what previous bylaws presented to appoint municipal law enforcement officers. It allows for power of entry and it puts them as standards officers under the Building Code Act. And it broadens their scope of inspection powers as well. Some of our older bylaws lack some of this information. So this bylaw puts it all back into one. And what we've done is we've rescinded all previous appointments as far back as 2016. And we will be reappointing our current bylaw officer so that he can also utilize these expanded scope of powers as well, including our 2 new part-time.
Okay, any questions? Motion for that bylaw. Councillor Gachardy. Seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? It's carried. All right, any notices of motion for tonight? No, okay. On to communications. I know Councillor Bernardo had a couple that he'd mentioned before the meeting started.
So, number 5, the letter from upper grant regarding long-term planning for accommodation. I'm wondering if we can invite them to come up here and share with us some of their plans and ideas in regards to long-term accommodation. And love to see their vision regarding what possibly is happening in this area, including the high school, additional feeder school. So if that could happen at some future council meeting, I think that that would be fantastic.
I would agree. I'd flag the same one. So their public engagement period, according to the letter, is from May to September. So if we could try to get them in some point before September and allow us an opportunity to provide some insight, I think that would be helpful, because as I recall, the last time they did this, I'm not sure what public they engaged, but there was no discussion at this level. So, yeah. Okay. And then I think you had one more.
Yeah, number 15, correspondence regarding the housing project. And I put forward a motion, and I sent to Jennifer, be it resolved, the town supports the motion from the city of Cambridge to amend section 205.1 of the Highway Traffic Act to allow for municipalities to locate the ASP anywhere within roadways within the community, either temporarily or permanently.
And just for clarity, ASC is the automated speed enforcement.
It's a camera, so basically, right now, it's only allowed within school zones or the terminologies.
Community safety.
Yeah, safety zones. So this way, we can utilize it as one of our enforcement tools anywhere within our community, and I think that it's important that the problem solvers do that.
All right, is there a seconder for that motion? Verdi. All right, any discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. All right. Okay, anybody else from communications? No. Okay, can I just have a motion then to receive the remaining items for information? Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Sample. All in favor? It's carried. No closed session tonight, so motion for confirming bylaw. Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Kushardi. All in favor? Carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? Carried. All right, thank you.
I'm actually missing Evelyn's first soccer game, so.
Oh.
So they are playing tonight.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, 7:30.
The next meeting is virtual.